Greetings, everyone. This is Jed Schlackman. I'm a holistic counselor and spiritual healer in Miami, Florida. In this short video clip, I will be talking about the topic, Be the Change You Wish to See in the World versus the War on Terrorism. That may sound like a provocative title. And to begin with, I want to go to that somewhat infamous quote, "Be the change." This is a quote that's been referenced, attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, who was the leader in India who helped that nation break free of British colonial rule. Gandhi actually did not make that exact quote. It's really a paraphrase of some things that he said. But using that idea that each of us is responsible for promoting the change that we wish to see in the world, it implies that we need to start with changing ourselves rather than fighting something external or acting against something that we see out there in the world around us. Now, in modern political theater, there's often talk about fighting against terrorism. And if we look at what fighting against terrorism really refers to, it is often one group of people who use terror who are denouncing another group of people who use terror. So terrorism is really a tactic. By definition, it's the use of violence or the threat of violence to attain some political aim or political goal. Looking back in our own country's history here in America, we had the American Revolution, where a certain small percentage of our colonial population decided that they would take up arms against the British colonial rulers. So from the point of view of England at that time, the American revolutionaries would have been terrorists. They were using violence and insurrection to attempt to gain independence from what the American colonists perceived as a somewhat oppressive or tyrannical rule by the British Empire. If the British had really wished to alleviate that issue, rather than having a war with the colonists, they could have had some type of dialogue or discussion to see what could be done to create a more prosperous situation in the colony, to give the colonial citizens more autonomy and less tax burden, perhaps. So to really listen to those people, to hear what their concerns were, to understand their needs, what would actually support their well-being, so that they wouldn't have felt that need to rebel, to attack their colonial ruler. Of course, in the last millennia or two, empires have played a very big role in civilization. Western civilization is to a great extent the story of different empires and their expansion and their clashes and conflicts with one another. And that process of empires conflicting with each other is still going on through the present time. In any case, terrorism, as I mentioned, is a method, it's a tactic that's used, and what may be justified to one person may be unjustified to another. So to many people in Arab countries, some type of attack or rebellion against Western colonial rule may appear justified, whereas to many Westerners it would appear unjustified. And to Westerners, the military intervention of America and some of its European allies in the Middle East might appear justified, whereas to many of the people in the Middle Eastern countries, it would appear to be a form of terrorism carried out by Western nations, a form of tyranny being carried out and causing crimes against the people in those countries. So it in many ways depends on the point of view whether those tactics, that violence or threat of violence, would be justified or not. Now, if we were to take our point of view now to the position of people in leadership roles here in America in the 21st century, we can think about all the talk that goes on about fighting terrorism. Since you can't really fight terrorism per se, because you're using violence to fight violence, so you're just creating more violence, you would maybe pause to consider what fosters people to act in those violent ways in the first place. So what gives people the beliefs and motivations to want to act in such a violent or militant manner? And if we are honest with ourselves, we can see that America is kind of a focal point of imperial domination. So there's financial, economic forces at work, corporate cartels, major mafia families and things of that nature that have been intervening throughout the world to build their empires, to accumulate material wealth and power, very often at the expense of the well-being and survival of other people. So really, those power factions have been carrying out violence and terrorism and causing much harm and destruction to other peoples in other countries and so on. So when you do that, of course, the people who are harmed are likely to hold a lot of anger and resentment for what has been done to them. So our country has helped create the conditions to fuel terrorism. In a sense, it's helped create the terrorists. And if you wanted to really make a change there, if you want to look at yourself and be the change, as we talked about at the beginning, you would have to honestly acknowledge what has happened, make some form of apology, perhaps some form of reparation for what you've done to harm others, and that will help reduce those sentiments that other people have that would lead them to become angry and hostile toward you. That's really, in the long run, the only way to promote a decrease in what is being referred to as terrorism or hostile actions by people from those other countries. Instead, the response is to focus on fighting against terrorism, which typically leads to even more anger and more resentment and further breeding ground for people to want to seek revenge of some kind. Now, to make matters even more complex, those powers that are building the empires know that this is likely to happen, that there's going to be that anger and resentment and potential for blowback. So what they do is they create what you would call controlled opposition. They essentially have their agents become manipulators or leaders of these different terrorist movements. So you had America's intelligence agency, the CIA, work with some of its allies' intelligence agencies to build up groups in the Middle East like Al-Qaeda and use them for their particular political or imperial purposes, and then later on to claim that those same groups were now starting to attack America and its allies, even though those secret government agents within America have actually been overseeing or controlling those terror organizations. So we have really the same forces at work in control of both sides, in control of those supposedly fighting against terrorism and those carrying out terrorism. So for them it's kind of a win-win situation. They control both sides of the apparent battle. And for the peoples of the world, both the people of America and other Western countries and the people of the Middle East or other foreign countries, it's kind of a lose-lose. So whether you support the so-called terrorists there, or you support the alliance that's supposedly fighting terrorism, you're supporting terrorism, whichever side you're supporting, and you're not really resolving anything. You're not facilitating a peaceful world where everyone is given freedom, everyone's given equal rights and an opportunity to prosper in their lives. We can each think of things in our own personal lives or the world around us where this principle of starting within, beginning with ourselves to make changes, to really shift our worldview or our paradigm of how we're relating to ourselves and other people around us. As we do that, we can find true solutions to the problems and challenges that may appear in the world. Problems, as has been said, can't be solved by working at the level of thinking that created them. So we really would need to start to look at another level of consciousness in order to address those issues. If we keep doing the same things, reacting in the same ways that we've been doing all along, we're kind of running in circles and nothing really changes. I encourage each of you to look at the ways that our leaders are guiding things in the world and see how honest or dishonest they may be, whether they're really acknowledging the true source of the problems and challenges that appear, or they're just presenting a disingenuous or misguided approach to providing some type of agenda or some type of plan to address those issues. If we don't really understand the source of how a problem is created, we're not really going to solve it. We may temporarily cover over that problem for a while, but it will continue to reappear. That principle is very obvious in the healthcare field, and working in holistic health, my approach is always to look at the whole person, at the whole picture of things, and to not solely try to provide symptomatic relief of something, but to actually understand what's causing and creating a particular issue, and to really address it on that level so that it can be more permanently resolved. As a society, we can take that holistic approach and apply it to anything that we perceive going on in the world, whether it's environmental harm, poverty, wars, financial or economic disparity, some types of human rights issues or persecutions that are occurring. So any of these issues that may concern us, we need to really look deeper and see what's going on in the deeper levels of belief systems and consciousness of people that's creating those issues. Many problems are a result of the basic beliefs that people have and the fundamental systems or structures that have been built in our civilization. If we're not really willing to question those basic ideas and basic structures, then we're not going to create or provide truly lasting change. I appreciate each of you for taking time to consider these ideas, to think about true change, deep and lasting change in your life and in the world around us. And I invite you to watch more of the videos on my channel and to visit my website at www.phinsights.com. That's PHINSIGHTS.com. Namaste.